What's going on, everyone? My name is Dylan Lundgren. I'm an addiction recovery advocate and speaker, and I'm really excited about what I'm going to talk to you about today. It's a hard topic to bring up, and yet it's something most of us have struggled with or maybe are even struggling with right now, and that topic is trauma. What I want to talk about for a minute before I share my own personal experience with this is how trauma and where trauma is stored. Think about this. If you're angry, there's two different ways to go about that. You could talk about it, or you could express it. It's almost like two different languages. I could say I'm angry, but that's much different than expressing that anger, or any emotion for that matter. And this is the difference between how trauma is stored. Trauma is stored mostly in the body, unconsciously in the body. So we have experiences that are undigested, experiences that we didn't get a chance to fully feel the experience because it was too much for us at the time. We were maybe too young, or it was just too intense for us to really take in. And so we pushed that experience down below our level of consciousness. The problem with that is that force, that energy, continues to try to make its way up to our conscious mind. And until it does that, it can cause all types of act outs and symptoms and behaviors that we don't want. But because we don't have a conscious connection to that energy or that unconscious pain, we don't realize that some of the things we're doing in the present moment are actually reactions to a past event that we never digested entirely. A past event, the pain of which, the sadness of which, the anger of which we never fully expressed and felt. Hence the difference between talking about something and really experiencing or expressing something. I can know I've had traumatic things happen. And in fact, the more traumatic they are, the less I'll even remember them. But I can know something's happened and still not be healed from it. I can know a traumatic experience has taken place, but still, because I haven't felt the pain, the impact it really had on me, haven't expressed what I really wanted to say at the time, that trauma can still affect my life. So how did it show up for me? When I was years into recovery, I was struggling with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I had this compulsion to check things. I remember driving back to work at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night just to check a document, to make sure I gave proper credit on this fitness document. I was a personal trainer at a rehab, and I was driving back to work to check this document. 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. Nobody was even in the office, except for me. It was extremely uncomfortable, and I felt out of control. But I didn't know why. All I knew is I had this compulsion, this driving force to do these behaviors that I didn't want to do, but was powerless to stop doing them. Sound familiar? Sounds kind of like an addiction, a substance use challenge. At the same time, I found this process called fear memory integration. And as I read the book, it made a lot of sense. And I worked with an individual who helped me heal this trauma. Now, I'm not perfect. I still have stuff to deal with, challenges to deal with in my life. But since doing this process, my OCD symptoms drastically reduced and have never returned to the same intensity or level again. That was years ago. See, I had something, like a lot of us, happen to me when I was younger. And I created an entire story around this that was held in my psyche and in my body is unexpressed pain and suffering. When I was around 10 to 12 years old. I was accused of doing something I didn't do. But at the time, I didn't know how to express that, how to express what was really going on for me, the anger, the confusion I felt about being accused of something pretty drastic, but not being able to stand up for myself. All I knew was the people around me believed something bad had happened. And for some reason, I was at the center of that dialogue. I didn't know why. No one would tell me why. And so I created this story that I had to figure it out for myself. See, OCD was feeling like something's wrong. No one's going to tell me what it is. So I have to go figure it out myself. That feeling was driving a lot of my behavior decades later. And until I learned how to get out of the language of my mind and into the language of my body, and how to access some of those old memories and pain and feel that pain in its proper context, until that happened, I was being driven automatically by this force to do these behaviors I didn't want to do. But once I accessed that pain and felt that pain in its entirety, in the proper context, and said the things I wanted to say at the time but didn't know how to, once that happened, healing occurred, my symptoms drastically decreased and never returned again. See, this can help us in the process of recovery. Not to mention, this is the starting point for a lot of people who suffer from addiction or substance use challenges. There was a study that showed that if someone's had more than 5 what are called adverse childhood experiences, basically traumatic experiences, they're 7 to 10 times more likely to have a substance use challenge. 7 to 10 times more likely. Jim Polero, the author of the book Fear, Memory, Integration, says you must feel in order to heal. Alice Miller talks about this and says it's not the trauma that's the problem, so much as it is the unexpressed suffering, hopelessness, pain, and despair that one was unable to give voice to. That's the real problem. And by having a space to do that and learning how to do that, we can heal. We can live a life in recovery that's not driven by other unwanted behaviors. That's my hope for you, and that's my hope for us. So I'm going to include some resources here that might be helpful for you. I'm not a doctor. I'm sharing my own experience and research on this topic, but I'd encourage you to do the same thing, to find something that works for you. And also, it's helpful to have somebody that can hold this space for you. If you are going to get into some deep emotions, to feel comfortable with the person or persons that you're with when you decide to express this stuff. The last thing I'll say is Bessel van der Kolk, the famous researcher and author of The Body Keeps the Score, said that yoga is better than any medication anybody has ever studied for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, basically trauma. And why is that? Well, because we spend most of our time looking out here, right? Like for whatever, for what we want, for to solve a problem, for how I'm feeling, all out here, out here, out here, out here. Reminds me of like, one of those things from like a submarine that comes up, But what we want to do is we want to bring it back down and in and focus on ourselves, mainly the body, and start to learn the language of the body. That's what yoga does. See, when I'm in a yoga pose and I'm breathing and I'm focusing on my alignment and I'm focusing on the sensations building in my body, I'm starting to become aware of the language of my body. And as I do that, things will start to come up because I'm not using my mind so much to kind of maybe check out. When I turn inward, things will come up. And when I learn to express them, eventually healing will happen. Connection will happen. Integration between mind and body will happen. So that's my hope for you. That's my hope for us. And by doing this, we can transform this culture of despair, a lot of these mental health challenges, addiction, overdose, relapse, a lot of this stuff has to do with pain. Not feeling pain, not feeling comfortable enough to find ways to access and express pain. By doing this work, we can create a culture that's safe and supportive of feeling our trauma, of feeling our pain, so we can move forward and live better, engaging, fulfilling lives in recovery. That's my hope for you. That's my hope for us, so we can transform this culture into a culture of hope.